I'm gonna start with a short introduction on things like I'm single, I have no pets, things like that to see if it relates to you, or it might be a little bit different, just so you can have some context before we dig into my saving and spending. I'm gonna talk a little bit about my environment growing up, so the conversations that I had with my parents about money, how open they were, some things that they did for me early on that I think really gave me a leg up over other people. We'll talk into the money mindset that I've kind of developed for myself to keep it very, very simple. And then at the end, we'll get into the salary that I make, how I save and spend, my net worth, my 401k. We'll jump into all that good stuff. So I hope it sparks some good discussion in the comments. Let's get started. Welcome back to the channel. This is Flownaut. I'm Brad. Before we get started today, I do got to throw out a disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor. All of this is stuff that I just do in my personal life. Take that as you will. This is not financial advice. This is just something that I thought would be helpful to put out there. To start off, I'm going to give a short introduction about myself. We'll see if it relates to you or if it's a little bit different. So I'm single currently. I have no pets. I have no kids. I don't plan on having kids. I work a 9-to-5 job at a corporate company that you would all recognize the brand. I've rented and owned. I owned a condo for about 5 years. Very much opened my eyes. You get so starry-eyed for like, I can now customize my kitchen and paint the walls and do all the aesthetic stuff. There's a lot of stuff that goes into home ownership. There's a lot of maintenance costs that you don't take into account. Taxes at the end of the year. It kind of ties you down and it really does teach you a lot. So if you haven't owned a home before, don't just jump into it. Really take into account on not just what the monthly payment is, but what are the taxes gonna be? What's your budget for if something goes wrong? Like I had the fridge and the washer and dryer and I had a leak from the ceiling. I had all these things that I just didn't really plan for in the beginning.
It's a real piece of shit.
Take that into account before jumping into probably the biggest financial commitment of your life. I rent currently. Where I am in my life right now, it just makes more sense. It gives me a lot more flexibility. Honestly, I'm a lot less stressed. If something breaks, I just submit a maintenance request and they come and take care of it. I don't have to pay for it out of my own pocket. I currently live in St. Louis. That will be changing later this year. I am so excited to talk about that topic. Not going to talk about it in this video. That will be a future video. So jumping into the money background. By this, I mean just kind of your environment growing up. Take a second to think about how you remember talking to your parents about money.
There's always money in the banana stand!
Were they open with you at the quote unquote dinner table or just sitting around talking to them? Do you remember the salary they made? Did they ever tell you the mortgage payment that they were paying on the house? How much they spent on you as a kid or kids if you had brothers and sisters? That stuff always really fascinated me. And for me, my parents were always very open with me about money. They would tell me how much they had in their 401k. I knew their salaries. I knew the mortgage payment. And the older I got, the more in depth those discussions got as well. How they were conversation-wise with me when I was younger played a huge impact on me now. So one big note for me when I was younger is I've had a credit card since I was 15 and a half. I vividly remember going into the bank with my mom and the lady at the bank just giving my mom such a hard time on wanting to get a credit card for a 15-year-old. She was not having it and she tried to convince my mom to not do it. My mom was kind of annoyed that the lady just wouldn't help us out initially, which she eventually did. My mom set the credit card up in my name. It was tied to my bank account, which we set up, but my mom actually paid for my credit card. Now, I wasn't out spending crazy money because we had pretty in-depth conversations on what a credit card was, the responsibility behind it. And we also had a rule that if the purchase was over $50, I had to call and ask for approval.
And it will not change without my approval.
Maybe I was buying like some new jeans or something like that. I had to call my mom and dad and tell them what I was getting and just making sure it was okay before I put it on the card. Instilling that in me from an early age, 100% impacted me in a very powerful and positive way the older that I got. I've never missed a credit card payment. I've always paid my credit card off in full. And it was because of what they taught me early on, being able to handle and manage credit cards effectively and not just spend more than I make. My parents paid for my college. I'll put that out there too. For those of you that watch the RSX videos, which is my car, they also paid for my car, which I talked about, which was $15,000. Car and college being paid off, huge leg up. I was fortunate enough for them to be able to do that. And they kind of told me even some of the struggles they had along the way, things that I didn't know as a kid, struggles that your parents kind of put on the strong front. And later on, if you talk to them again, like you find out some things that you're a kid, you're not thinking about it. Those were huge for me. And I always talk to friends that had car debt and student loan debt coming out of college to try to understand how they were doing it on their salary. What was their car payment? What was their student loan payment? Even though I didn't have it, I still talked to people that did. And I think it gave me a greater appreciation, especially as I got older, how big of a gift that was from my parents. So if you're lucky enough like I was and your parents happen to do that for you, make sure you give them a big thank you and tell them how much you appreciate it. Some other context is I do have a small amount of debt currently, so I have about $2,000 left on a loan. It is 0% interest. I got a new AC unit before I sold my condo. It's a $122 payment. I'm just paying it off slowly. I'd rather take that money and invest it. I also got a new iPhone recently. I went from an iPhone 10 to an iPhone 15. It was $1,000, a 0% interest loan. That is all of my debt that I have. My credit score is over 800. My parents made sure I understood the difference between a minimum payment and paying the statement off in full, the consequences of only paying the minimum payment, how much interest is stacked on. And you don't really learn that in college either. That's something that I learned through books and my parents. And I'm going to recommend 3 books. First, I would read The Psychology of Money. I think that gave me just a great kind of foundation and understanding of money. This isn't a book review, but if you're looking for some takeaways, these are some good books to read. The next one's Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. Some of the stuff I don't agree with, but I think it breaks it down in a very simple way, just very simple steps for you to understand certain aspects of money. And a book that I really, really love is I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramsey Sadie. I love his take on giving you your rich life. You'll know what I mean by that when you read it. Next is Mindset. This one's gonna be so simple, and I know you've heard it before. Spend less than you make. I remember my parents saying that to me since I was younger. I think a lot of people still don't grasp that. Keep it simple. I think a lot of people overcomplicate their money. They might have too many cards, too many checking accounts, too many savings accounts. Money's kind of all over the place. Simplify your accounts in a way to make it easy and automate those payments so you don't have to spend time thinking about it. I'll kind of break down what I do. I have 1 debit card and I have 2 credit cards. Every single basically thing that I purchase, I put on 1 credit card. I would consider myself a credit card person. I've always paid off my statement in full, never had interest on my credit card. I'm used to having a credit card, I think, because of the conversations that my parents had with me and because I've had one for so long. Understand a credit card if you're gonna use one. Not everyone is a credit card person, and that's fine. If you're spending more than you make on a credit card, cut the card up. Stop using it. Revert to your debit card. Try to readjust that mentality of spending less than you make and getting used to that before using a credit card. Aim to have a 6 months emergency fund. Having an emergency fund like that takes so much stress out of your life for unexpected medical expenses. Engine goes out in your car, you pop a tire, car-related things, you lose your job. Those are probably the big 3 that I can think of. I'm sure there's a bunch more. 6 months is a very healthy emergency fund. And if you're just trying to get started, then maybe shoot for 3, but I would aim to have that goal of at least 6. The 50-20-30 rule is something to maybe Google search. So 50% on necessity spending, things like your fixed costs, your rent, your utilities, your internet, your groceries, things that you will always purchase every single month. Those are your fixed costs. Your saving would be things like your emergency fund, your retirement funds, so your 401k, your Roth IRA, stocks, any additional investing that you're doing. Maybe you're saving for a down payment on a house, saving up for a new car, things like that. That would all be in the saving category. And then your wants would be things like subscriptions, like Netflix, Hulu, things like that, going out to eat, shopping, all that would fall into your wants category. So 50% necessity, 20% savings, 30% wants. Those numbers are not set in stone. It's just a good foundational starting point, and then you can tweak those dependent to your life. And then the biggest thing is just start saving as early as you can because of compounding. Do a quick search. You'll find the classic chart. It has just the curving arch up. Basically, the short thing around that is the earlier you start saving, the more time that your money has to compound. If you have 10 grand saved in your 20s versus 10 grand saved in your 30s to 40s, watch the numbers on how different they grow. There's compound calculators out there and you can kind of mess with the numbers, but it's really, really interesting if you're new to that concept. The last topic that I'll talk about is how I actually save and spend. So I'll talk about my salary, my net worth, things like that. My net worth is $104,800. And how you get your net worth is your assets minus your liabilities. So your assets tallied up are things like your 401k, your savings accounts, what you've paid off on your home versus the debt that you have left on your home. Your car might be considered an asset. So my assets tallied up are $107,800. I gave my car a value of $10,000. I think that's a conservative estimate based on what I've seen online should I choose to sell my car in the future. And then my liabilities are $3,000. So that's my debts. So that was the $2,000 that I owe on my AC unit and the $1,000 that I owe on my phone. So it's $107,800 minus $3,000. That's where I get the $104,800 for the total net worth. I have an index fund for my stocks. If you don't know what an index fund is, it's just a fund that has very low fees. It's like 0.03%. And it's just diversified in a bunch of different stocks. So like Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, you can do your research on index funds, but it's a pretty conservative. I just started trying to max out my Roth IRA, so that's something that's new to me. I've only done that for the past 2 years, something like that. So that one I just started. For 401k, I have just a target date fund. That just means like the date that you're going to retire at, it starts more aggressive, and then the older you get, it gets a little bit more conservative, but you don't have to manage it at all. I basically just consistently add to it. Every single paycheck comes out automatically. I don't even think about it. Regardless of what the market's doing, I don't care. Constantly just put money in there. A little story about my 401k too. So this is something I do not recommend.
I fucked up.
But when I sold my condo, I had no savings. Basically it was zero. Like I said, I had a lot of stuff go wrong. I was financing things like furniture, just being a little bit dumb with my money, filling up rooms. You have a house, you have empty rooms. It makes you want to spend a little bit more money to fill up those rooms, which to me was kind of a downside of homeownership for me personally. So I had about $16,000. It's like two years ago when I sold the condo. I pulled that money out of my 401k, which I do not recommend doing. I didn't have savings and I wanted to start with a fully funded emergency fund. I knew that the company that I work for now had a good 401k match that I read in my offer, and that $41,100 in my 401k currently is only after about a year and a half of being at that company. So it's grown very rapidly. That's kind of how I justify it. I would use that as a last resort. I would not pull out of your 401k, but that's something I'm going to throw out there just to kind of give you that context. My gross salary is $7,400. So that's based off about an $88,500 salary a year. So that's gross. So without taxes and stuff taken out, my total take home after taxes is $5,090. The take home that I'm going to be going off of for the purposes of breaking down my needs, wants, and saving is my take home minus my 401k percentage. So I'm doing 20% to my 401k right now. So my final take home is $4,358 a month. My needs are $2,565. That is from rent and utilities and internet are kind of all bundled into one. That's about $1,500. Utilities vary sometimes, so $1,500 is about the average. Car insurance, $120.58. I always pay my car insurance in full. It was about $1,447. You can actually save about $100 to $200 paying it in full, depending on the insurance that you have, but I still give you the monthly spend, just kind of breaking all this down. Gas, about $160 a month. Groceries, $500 a month. Phone, about $80 a month. My debt is $122 a month. That's the payments broke down on that loan that I have for $2,000 for my AC unit. And then my subscriptions are $83 a month. So my savings, I like to say between $500 to $800 a month. That's in addition to my 401k percentage, that 20% that I'm doing. That $500 to $800 a month is going towards my emergency fund to continue building that up, or other things that I might be saving for, whatever that is, vacations, things like that. I keep it all in one high yield savings account. Current emergency fund is in a high yield savings account. It's about 4.5% interest, which I think is about the average right now. $13,200 is what I currently have in there. It's just under my 6-month mark. And the reason being is I pulled out $3,500 this year to max out the rest of my Roth IRA for the year. So now I'm just kind of taking that $500 to $800 a month and just replenishing to get my emergency fund back up to 6 months. In my wants category, I give myself about $1,000, give or take. I don't calculate, like I allot $300 for eating out on the weekend, $100 for shopping. I don't do any of that. I just make it easy and I give myself $1,000. However I want to divvy that up, I kind of give myself that limit so I'm not surprised when I get the bill. Again, pay the statements off every month in full. So that was a lot of information, but I hope this sparks some discussion below. I'd love to hear from you if you're willing to share how old you are, how much you make per year, your salary, and maybe how much you have saved at this point. What's a big struggle for you with money? How open were you with your parents growing up? What did mentors teach you that maybe helped you along the way? Good books that you've read? I think we can all learn from each other when we're open about topics like this. Let me know what you liked or disliked. Punch the like button below. If you like this content, consider subscribing. I've really enjoyed talking to some of the people that I've got to chat with in the comments, and I can always continue learning more. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video. So bye for now.